I swear, I've never seen anything like it in my entire life. There it was, this massive lynx, dangling from a thick branch, caught in some kind of rusty old trap. But that's not what froze me in place. Standing just a few feet away was a gorilla. A freaking gorilla. My brain couldn't even process what I was seeing. This was northern Montana, not the jungle. I stood there gripping my backpack straps so tight my knuckles turned white. The lynx let out a desperate yowl. Its eyes locked right on me. And the gorilla? It didn't even flinch. It just stood there, staring at me like it had been expecting someone. My heart slammed in my chest. Part of me wanted to turn and run, but my legs refused to move. It was like the forest itself was holding its breath. I glanced around, hoping, praying. Someone else was nearby. No one. Just me, the lynx, and that huge silverback. The lynx struggled again, claws flailing at empty air, the trap biting deep into its hind leg. I could see blood staining its fur. I had to do something, but the gorilla... What the hell was it doing here? And why wasn't it moving? I took a cautious step forward. The gorilla's head turned slightly, following my movement, but still didn't approach. My throat was dry. I whispered, more to myself than anything, "It's okay. It's okay." My eyes stayed locked on the gorilla as I crept closer to the tree. The lynx hissed, but its eyes were filled with something else. Pleading, desperate. And somehow, I felt like it was begging me. Not just with its cries, but with its whole body. 10 feet away now, the gorilla still didn't move. It just watched. I finally tore my eyes away and focused on the lynx. The trap was old, rusted, probably left there by some poacher long ago. Its jagged teeth were buried deep, and the lynx was shaking with exhaustion. I needed to get it out fast, but my hands were shaking so bad I couldn't think straight. Then the gorilla did something I'll never forget. Took a single step back. That's it. Just one step, but it felt like a signal, like permission. I don't know how else to explain it. I dropped my backpack and rushed the last few feet, heart pounding out of my chest. Kneeling beneath the lynx, I grabbed the trap and tried to pry it open, but it wouldn't budge. The lynx was panting hard, eyes rolling. "Hang in there, buddy," I muttered, throwing my weight onto the rusty mechanism. Still nothing. I yanked off my jacket and wrapped it around the lynx's body, hoping to calm it down. The gorilla made a low, rumbling sound. Not threatening, more like encouragement. I couldn't believe what was happening. I braced myself and pulled with everything I had. Finally, with a loud snap, the trap sprang open. The lynx dropped to the ground with a cry, dragging its injured leg. I stumbled back, gasping for breath, sweat pouring down my face. And then the lynx didn't run. It just lay there, eyes darting between me and the gorilla. I looked up, expecting the gorilla to charge or at least react. But no, it stood still, chest rising and falling slowly, eyes calm but sharp. For a moment, none of us moved. The forest was dead silent. Finally, the gorilla turned and, without a sound, disappeared into the trees. I stood there, frozen, watching it fade into the shadows. The lynx let out a weak whimper, and my attention snapped back. I knew I had to get help, fast. I grabbed my phone, no signal. Figures. I slung my backpack over one shoulder, bent down, and, as carefully as I could, scooped the lynx into my arms. It was lighter than I expected, but every muscle in its body was tense. I started the long trek back to my truck, every step filled with adrenaline and disbelief. What the hell had I just witnessed? A lynx? A gorilla? Working together? Or was it just coincidence? I didn't have answers. All I knew was this was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke up thinking it had all been some weird, messed up dream. But when I looked down at my jacket, still covered in blood and dirt, reality slammed back into me. That lynx, that gorilla, it was real. And the lynx, it was still out there, injured and alone. I couldn't shake the image of its eyes, so wild, yet begging for help. I barely slept the night before, tossing and turning, trying to make sense of what I had witnessed. I didn't waste time. I grabbed my boots, filled a thermos with coffee, and threw some medical supplies into my backpack. Bandages, antiseptic, even some basic painkillers. I had no idea if it would help a wild animal, but it was all I had. I left a note on my kitchen table, just in case I didn't make it back. Call it paranoia, but something about this felt bigger than me. I had to go back. I needed to know the lynx was okay. I drove straight to the trailhead, my heart pounding the whole way. The sky was overcast, and the forest felt heavier than usual, like it knew something was about to happen. I hiked fast, retracing my steps from the day before. Every snapped twig made me jump. I kept replaying the scene in my head. The gorilla's stare, the lynx's cries. It felt like walking into a dream I wasn't ready to relive. After about 20 minutes, I reached the spot. Empty. The trap lay open on the ground, twisted and broken. Blood still stained the leaves, but no lynx, no gorilla. I stood there, scanning the woods, straining to hear anything. Silence. My stomach churned with dread. Had the lynx wandered off and collapsed somewhere? Had the gorilla taken it? My mind raced through every awful possibility. And then, rustling, my head whipped around. There, about 50 feet away, the lynx, limping, dragging its hind leg, but alive. Relief flooded through me so hard I nearly fell to my knees. I stepped forward, calling out softly, "Hey, it's me. I'm here to help." The lynx froze, eyes wide. For a second, it looked like it might bolt, but then, something incredible happened. It let out a low, choked cry and looked behind it. My eyes followed its gaze, and my stomach dropped. The gorilla, again, standing tall, half-hidden behind a tree, watching. The same calm but unblinking stare. I stopped dead in my tracks, hands raised instinctively. My voice shook. "It's okay. I just want to help. I won't hurt you." The lynx let out another cry, but this time it wasn't fear. It sounded urgent, almost like a signal. The gorilla stepped out from the shadows, moving slowly but with purpose. My heart slammed against my ribs. Was it going to stop me? Attack? I couldn't read its eyes. Every step it took felt like time had slowed down. The gorilla moved toward the lynx, stopping just a few feet away. Then, without warning, it crouched down and gently touched the lynx's injured leg. I swear to God, it was like watching a doctor examine a patient. My breath caught. This couldn't be real. My knees nearly buckled as I watched, frozen in disbelief. The lynx whimpered but didn't pull away. The gorilla looked up at me, and for a second, I felt like it was waiting for me to do something. His deep brown eyes held so much intelligence. It gave me chills. I dropped my bag and slowly pulled out the gauze and antiseptic. My hands shook as I stepped closer, eyes locked on the gorilla. It didn't move. I kneeled down inch by inch until I was next to the lynx. "Easy, easy," I whispered, dabbing the wound. The lynx flinched but stayed still. I worked fast, cleaning the blood, wrapping the leg as gently as I could. The gorilla stayed right there, watching every move, making these low, deep sounds, almost like it was soothing the lynx. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I even caught myself whispering, "You're doing good, both of you." Minutes passed like hours. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. When I finished, I sat back on my heels, heart hammering. The lynx looked at me, then at the gorilla. And then, something I'll never forget. The lynx nudged its head toward the gorilla, as if thanking it. The gorilla let out a quiet grunt, stood up, and without a sound, started walking away into the forest. The lynx hesitated, looked back at me one last time, and then, limping, followed. I sat there, frozen, watching them disappear into the trees, my mind buzzing with questions I couldn't even begin to answer. What kind of connection did they have? How was this even possible? Were they part of some secret experiment? Or was nature stranger than I'd ever realized? I stayed there for a long time, staring into the empty woods, the bandages still sticky on my fingers. A single bird called out high in the trees, breaking the silence. I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And deep down, I knew I had to find out the truth no matter what it took. I couldn't get that moment out of my head. Even days later, I kept replaying it. How the lynx had leaned into the gorilla, how they had both disappeared into the woods together. It haunted me. I knew I should have left it alone, but I couldn't. I had to know more. I had to understand what the hell was going on out there. 3 days after that last encounter, I found myself back on the same trail, my backpack loaded with more supplies, a flashlight, and a pair of old binoculars. The weather had shifted. The air was humid, and thunderclouds were building on the horizon. As I moved deeper into the forest, I kept my eyes peeled for any sign. Footprints, broken branches, anything. About an hour in, I spotted something weird. At first, I thought it was just a pile of fallen branches, but when I got closer, my stomach dropped. It was a shattered metal cage, twisted and rusting, half buried under leaves. One side looked like it had been forced open, bent outward like something powerful had broken out. My heart pounded in my ears. This couldn't be a coincidence. I crouched down, running my fingers over the jagged edges. That's when I noticed them, large footprints, way too big for a human. They led away from the cage, deeper into the woods. I hesitated for a second, but curiosity won. I followed. The tracks were scattered but clear enough to trace. As I moved, I noticed other strange things. Scratch marks on tree trunks, remnants of rope, and what looked like old food containers. Someone had been keeping animals out here, or experimenting. My gut twisted at the thought. Suddenly, I heard a noise, a low grunt, familiar now. I ducked behind a fallen log, heart racing. Peeking over, I saw them. The lynx, still limping but looking stronger, sat near a small clearing. And the gorilla, it was standing guard, scanning the trees like it was on high alert. They hadn't seen me yet. I stayed hidden, watching. That's when I noticed something else. Behind them, partially hidden by branches, was a structure. Not natural, man-made. A shack or maybe an old outpost. Its door hung crookedly, and the windows were shattered. What the hell was this place? I crept closer, moving slow, careful not to make a sound. But the gorilla's head snapped up. Its eyes locked on my hiding spot. My breath caught. I was frozen, sure it was about to charge. But instead, it made a low sound and stepped aside, as if inviting me. Couldn't believe it. My legs shook as I stood up, hands raised. "I don't want to hurt you," I said softly. I want to understand." The lynx watched me closely but didn't move. Slowly, I walked past them, toward the building. The air was thick with tension. Every step felt like crossing some invisible line. I reached the shack and hesitated at the door. The wood creaked as I pushed it open. Inside was chaos. Broken cages, overturned tables, old medical equipment scattered everywhere. Papers littered the floor, most too water-damaged to read, but a few words stood out. Behavioral study, cross-species, adaptation. My skin crawled. What had they been doing out here? I turned, and the gorilla was standing right behind me, watching. The lynx limped up beside it, eyes on me like it was waiting for my next move. I felt a shiver run down my spine. These animals weren't just survivors, they were witnesses to something dark. I snapped a few photos with my phone, but deep down I knew this wasn't something you could explain with a picture. I had stumbled onto something much bigger than I was ready for. The gorilla let out a soft grunt and stepped back, almost like it was telling me, "That's enough for now." I nodded, swallowing hard. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." And just like that, they turned and disappeared into the forest again, leaving me alone with 1,000 questions and no answers. As I stood there, the first drops of rain started to fall, and I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not even close. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept racing, replaying every detail of what I'd found. The broken cages, the medical equipment, those cryptic papers. I knew I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. By morning, I made the call to the local police and then to a nearby wildlife research center. I wasn't even sure how to explain it all without sounding insane, but somehow, they took me seriously. A few hours later, I met up with Officer Danvers and 2 biologists, Sarah Green and Tom Miller, at the trailhead. Sarah looked sharp and focused, her eyes narrowing as I briefed them. Tom, a big guy with a quiet demeanor, didn't say much, but you could tell he was taking everything in. "Are you telling us there's a gorilla running loose in these woods?" Danvers asked, disbelief all over his face. "Yes," I said firmly, "and a lynx, but they're different, smarter. They're working together." Sarah exchanged a glance with Tom. "Show us," she said simply. We hiked in silence, tension thick in the air. I led them straight to the shack. The rain from a few days ago had muddied the path, but the footprints were still faintly visible. When we reached the building, Sarah's eyes widened. "Jesus," she muttered, stepping inside. They explored every corner. Tom examining the broken cages, Sarah flipping through the water-damaged papers. Officer Danvers took photos, documenting everything. Sarah finally held up a torn folder. This is insane. Behavioral modification trials. Cross-species intelligence tests. Who was running this? "I have no idea," I said. "But they were definitely keeping those animals here." Tom pointed at claw marks on the wall. "Look at this. Whatever was in here, it was strong. Stronger than anything I've seen before." We spent nearly 2 hours combing through the wreckage, piecing together scraps of information. It was clear. Someone had been running illegal experiments, and they'd lost control. But the big question remained: how had the lynx and gorilla survived on their own, and why were they still sticking together? Suddenly, Sarah froze. "Did you hear that?" We all went still. A faint rustle outside. Tom moved to the window, peering out. "They're here," he whispered. I rushed to the door just in time to see them, the lynx and the gorilla standing at the tree line watching us. It was like they knew we were investigating. Sarah stepped up beside me, her breath catching. "My God, they're really here." Officer Danvers reached for his radio. "We need backup." "No," Sarah snapped. "Don't scare them off. We need to observe, not chase." We stood there, frozen, locked in a silent standoff. The gorilla's eyes scanned each of us, then landed on me. For a moment, it felt like time stopped. Then, without warning, the gorilla made a deep sound and turned. The lynx followed, and within seconds, they vanished into the forest. "Damn it," Tom muttered. "We need to track them." We rushed out, but it was no use. They were gone. Not a single trace left behind. We scoured the area for hours, but it was like they'd disappeared into thin air. As the sun started setting, Sarah shook her head. This changes everything. We're dealing with something unprecedented." Danvers sighed, snapping his notebook shut. "We'll file a report, but something tells me no one's going to believe this." Back at the trailhead, Sarah pulled me aside. "I don't know how you got involved in this, but don't stop looking. We need people like you paying attention." I nodded, still dazed. As they packed up and drove away, I stood alone, staring into the darkening woods. One thing was certain: this story was far from over. Weeks turned into months, but the memory of that spring haunted me like a shadow. Life moved on. I went back to work, tried to settle into old routines, but nothing felt the same. Every time I hiked those woods, I half expected to see a flash of fur or hear that deep, rumbling grunt. But the forest stayed quiet, and the world seemed to pretend nothing had ever happened. Still, every rustle of the trees or flicker of movement in the corner of my eye set my heart racing all over again. I kept in touch with Sarah and Tom. They ran tests, filed reports, even brought in outside experts, but answers were scarce. The official line was, "No further sightings, case unresolved." But we all knew better. The story had sunk its claws into us, and none of us could let it go completely. We had meetings, long phone calls, and exchanged theories late into the night, but no real closure ever came. It was like chasing shadows. One evening, as I was sitting on my porch watching the sunset, my phone buzzed with a notification. Unknown sender. No subject. Just a video file. I hesitated, heart thumping, then tapped to play. The screen flickered to life, and there they were. The lynx and the gorilla. Together. The lynx looked healthier, its fur thick and clean, the limp barely noticeable now. The gorilla stood beside it, powerful and calm, like a silent guardian. The camera zoomed out, showing a vast, wild landscape. Definitely not anywhere near here. Mountains in the distance, thick forests, untouched nature. Someone had found them, somewhere far away, and decided I needed to see it. I watched, transfixed, as the lynx padded forward and rubbed its head against the gorilla's massive leg. The gorilla responded with a gentle touch, resting its hand lightly on the lynx's back. The bond between them was undeniable. Something deeper than instinct, something human. I paused the video, rewound, and played it again over and over, unable to look away. The video ended without explanation, no message, no clues. I sat there, staring at the screen, a strange mix of awe and sadness washing over me. Who had filmed this? Where were they now? How did they survive all this time? And why send it to me? I had a million questions, but not a single answer. I forwarded the video to Sarah and Tom immediately. Within minutes, Sarah called me, her voice breathless. "Where did you get this?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "It just showed up." This changes everything," she whispered. "We need to trace the source, find out who filmed it." Tom joined the call too, his voice serious and low. "If they're still alive and thriving somewhere else, it means they adapted in ways we didn't think were possible. We can't let this drop." But deep down, I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Maybe some stories weren't meant to be solved. Maybe the magic was in the mystery itself. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that no matter how many experts weighed in or how many reports were filed, nothing could truly explain what I had witnessed with my own eyes. Days turned into weeks again, but the feeling lingered, that sense of unfinished business. Sometimes, late at night, I'd open that video and watch it over and over, feeling like I was peeking into a secret world I was never meant to see. It became a ritual of sorts, a reminder that there are still wonders out there that defy logic. One morning, months later, I hiked back to the old shack. It was overgrown now, nature reclaiming what was hers. The cages were rusted through, papers long since blown away. Vines twisted around the broken beams, and moss covered the floor like a thick blanket. But as I stood there, a sudden rustle caught my ear. I turned, heart racing, but it was just a deer, watching me from a distance before darting off. I smiled to myself. Part of me had hoped, but maybe it was better this way. Some bonds, some stories are meant to live in the wild, free from human hands. I walked through the ruins one last time, brushing my fingers over the cold, damp metal of the cages, and whispered to no one in particular, "I hope you're safe out there." As I walked back toward the trailhead, I found myself whispering, "Goodbye, and thank you." I don't know if they heard me, but somehow I like to think they did. As I reached my truck, I took one last look at the woods, the fading sunlight casting long shadows across the trees. And for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. And that's where I'll leave it for now. Because while the world may never understand what really happened that spring, I do know one thing for sure. Trust, loyalty, and friendship, they don't belong to humans alone. Sometimes the most powerful connections are the ones we can't explain. And maybe, just maybe, that's the way it should be.